Greetings and welcome to another Patch Notes video here at Words About Games, a weekly video series that lets us host discussions and post opinion pieces about our various thoughts on games, gaming, and the industry. Today I want to talk about Control. Well, that's not entirely accurate. I want to talk about Control every day, because it's a fantastic game that I love very much. But playing through it recently, one of the reasons I find it such a brilliant game is the old house. The world that you spend the entirety of your time in the game exploring. I touched on the old house in my impressions video a few weeks ago, but I want to dive into talking about what makes it an exceptionally well designed and well thought out space to explore, and why it stands apart from the way world design has been going in big budget games in the past few years. As a warning, there will be potentially mild spoilers for Control in this video. I won't spoil any major plot points or moments, but I will be talking in detail about some stuff that could potentially be considered minor spoilers. First, the old house. The home of the Federal Bureau of Control, a government organisation that investigates, examines, and protects the world from paranormal items and events. It's a place where you can find everything from a fridge that needs to be stared at 24/7 to an entire wing dedicated to mirror dimensions, as well as fully staffed and stocked departments dedicated to the study and understanding of these phenomena. It's also a place that doesn't make a heap of sense as a building in downtown New York. That's kind of the point of it, and its very concept allows Remedy to create a world where you truly have no idea what could possibly be around the next corner, except that it'll probably be weird and defy logic. Control sets this up in a beautifully subtle way in its very first moments, thanks to both the mysterious janitor you meet and the path you take to the elevator for your quote-unquote job interview. Exploring the seemingly deserted ground floor of this skyscraper sees you come across the building's janitor. He's quite typical of a certain type of character you always meet in a setting like the old house. He rambles and seems crazy, but he definitely knows way more about the building and the situation unfolding within than someone with his job should know. He can also totally read your mind, given that he verbally responds to Jesse's inner monologue in a brilliant but subtle moment during your first encounter. The janitor also directs you to the elevator you're looking for, which sends you back out of the door you entered through, even though this isn't physically possible, since you haven't looped back around on yourself, but you followed a corridor from start to finish. Both of these moments are subtle and quite easy to miss, and far from the strangest thing you'll see in a game where if you pull a certain light switch 3 times, you'll end up in a motel in a different part of America. But these moments are a nice setup for not only the strangeness of the old house, but how much care Remedy has paid to the small details that make up its crazy world. It's really in the attention to even the smallest details that make Control's world work so well. The old house is a place that makes absolutely no real-world sense, but it follows its own internal logic to a fault, which helps make it a believable place within its own fiction. This is absolutely how a government research and containment facility designed for paranormal otherworldly items and events would be set up. The old house is segmented into different departments set up specifically for different types of altered world items and events, as well as objects of power, and the evidence of this research and containment you find throughout your travels makes the world feel real, lived in, and a place where you want to explore every last corner. Not for any arbitrary upgrades or skill points or XP, but simply to see what Remedy could have hidden in all of the areas you can't get to until later on, be it a room overrun by post-it notes or another episode of everyone's favourite creepy puppet show for kids. Rather than design the world around the gameplay, the old house feels like it was designed first. Like Remedy came up with the concept of what the house is and what could possibly be inside it, and then figured out how that could be translated into a game that people can play. It's the world design that informs the gameplay experiences you'll encounter instead of the other way around, and it's Control's best trick. Instead of side quests that feel meaningless in the larger context of the game, you're given glimpses into different parts of the game's lore, usually in really interesting ways. Sure, not all the side quests are winners, they never are, but I still think about Fridge Duty, the side quest that begins when you come across the unfortunate employee stuck watching a fridge, and more specifically, everything that follows on from that moment, or tracking down escaped altered items that all behave in unique and interesting ways. This is also what makes Control's collectibles so vital to the experience, rather than throwaway trinkets designed to give you something to do with little to no reward. In Control, the collectibles are the memos, documents, and audio and video logs that describe the various altered items and altered world events that the Bureau has come into contact with. Instead of feeling like filler content, Control's collectibles are something I gladly sought out and consumed because they offered me just another glimpse into the new worlds I'd stepped into. And also because some of them are about Alan Wake, and I yearned deeply for anything new about Alan Wake. This stands in stark contrast to the open worlds that are just really common in games. I played Control at a time when I was feeling incredibly burned out on these worlds. The vast majority of open world games I've played recently have left me feeling fatigued with how they work, how they're set up, and the hoops they expect you to jump through just to reach some meaningful content. Now, Control isn't an open world, not really, but playing it helped solidify in my mind why open world games have left me feeling so disinterested. These are huge, massive worlds, and yet a lot of the time they feel so empty. Worlds where collectibles are merely trinkets or doodads that are practically meaningless, designed purely for the sake of having something in a location for players to collect, rather than existing to enhance your experience within the world. Dozens or hundreds of things to divert you from the critical mission path just to give players another distraction or another checklist of content to work through. Gigantic worlds, more and more, feel like they exist purely for publishers to boast about how big their maps are, with little to no thought put into how those maps are designed or any meaningful content that could possibly be put in them. Take Crackdown 3, a game released earlier this year. That game's map is huge and packed full of drab repeating side quests and hundreds of orbs for you to collect to help level your character up. But if you took away the effect of completing these side quests and the collectathons, the incremental character advancement, would you still take the diversion purely on the strength of what you were doing in the game? Because I sure wouldn't. Would you take your time to complete the side activities in The Division 2 if it wasn't tied to grinding XP or completing a checklist? These are just two examples of a plethora of open world games that are bursting with things to occupy your time. I could sit here and list open world games all day long that are stuffed to bursting with meaningless busywork, designed to pad out a game rather than offering you a worthwhile diversion. The apex of this approach to open world design, and the moment I seriously began to wonder if I was simply done with open world games, was the moment that made me quit Anthem shortly after it released. It wasn't the bugs or the poorly implemented loot grind that finished off any interest I had in the game, but how blatantly it was designed to waste your time. I'm referring to the challenges of Legionnaire's questline, where the game stops pretending to be anything but a waste of time, forcing you to complete a series of drab challenges such as finding treasure chests or getting headshots in order to progress. Playing this section of the game was akin to having an epiphany. This is how most open world games treat you, putting a series of meaningless tasks between you and the content that's actually relevant or meaningful. But at least Anthem had the nerve to be upfront about simply wanting you to kill some time. The challenges of the Legionnaire's questline was the ultimate answer to the question of whether I would complete those tasks without the incentive of an incremental upgrade to my character's power level. No, because as soon as the game put those tasks in the way of my progressing through the story, I stopped playing the game entirely. Had the challenges of the Legionnaire's quest never happened, I wouldn't have even given those challenges a second thought. The flip side of this problem does exist in a few open world games where I can categorically say I would play the side content even if I wasn't gaining anything for it, because I've done it before. I tackled so many side quests in The Witcher 3 that I was severely overleveled for, simply because I wanted to explore more of the world, see more of its creatures and monsters, and experience more of its story. I tackled so many side quests that were grayed out on my quest log and giving me 0 XP, purely because I wanted to do them. Now, before anyone accuses me of expecting all open world games to live up to impossible to meet standards, I'm not expecting every open world to be packed to the rafters with grade A storytelling content in all corners of the map. I platinum Spider-Man, not because I felt a compelling need to see all the gang hideouts or landmarks of New York, but because the more side content I tackled, the more I could get to interact with the wonderful swinging mechanics and excellent combat in the game. I rode around in circles in the boat sections of God of War, purely so I could hear all the stories that Kratos and Mimir would tell Atreus as you sailed from one location to the next. I'm not asking for every single piece of content in an open world game to be the same caliber as a main story mission, complete with fully mocapped cutscenes, massive storylines, and huge sprawling objectives. I just want a compelling reason to actually engage with it. The Old House gave me that, and in doing so showed me why my interest in open world games has been flagging recently. There are so many reasons to explore, control, and track down every side quest and collectible the game has to offer. Nothing feels wasted, and nothing feels like it exists just because, or to waste your time. Each memo, each new room, each optional area gives you something, whether it's a fascinating new encounter, a deeper understanding of the lore of the game, or an incredibly surprising turn of events centered around a fridge. I wish more open worlds tread their content with as much care as Remedy did The Old House. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you've enjoyed it, please leave us a comment, like, or subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We've got tons of awesome videos coming every week, including review impressions, indie game of the week, debate-driven top 5 lists, video essays, and our weekly podcast where we discuss games, gaming culture, and the games industry. We also stream 3 times a week at twitch.tv/wordsaboutgames. But most importantly, have a fantastic day.